Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to our program on Kardec Radio.
Welcome to the messengers in our home. Hello, dear Kardec Radio listeners. Welcome back to the messengers in our home. Tonight we're going to talk about chapter 26, Listening to the Workers. Hello, Mackenzie.
Hi, Francisca. And hello, dear friends. Welcome back to another chapter of the messengers in our home.
So before we start, we would like to invite you for our opening prayer. Take a moment, take a deep breath. Letting go of our days and being fully here, right now. Elevating our thoughts to the higher spheres. Dear Mother, Father, God, Creator of the universe and of our yet small hearts, we thank you so much for all the blessings we receive every single day, and especially the ones that we don't identify as such in the first place. We thank you for the many opportunities to learn and to grow, to progress step by step, learning more about your laws, and feeling your support in our everyday life. And so we use this opportunity to connect to you, dear God. And we ask you to open our hearts and our minds so that we may absorb the teachings of tonight's program in the best possible way, and most importantly, that we are able, little by little, to put them into practice in our daily life. We would like to welcome the good spirits working on Kardec Radio, and thank them also for their love and support, for guiding us, for inspiring us, and for being with us in this endeavor. And with your permission, we would like to start our meeting. So be it. So let us now listen to the reading of chapter 26. Enjoy.
Chapter 26, Listening to the Workers. I noticed that the work at the station was unfolding in the friendliest and most harmonious atmosphere, despite the natural respect for notions of hierarchy. While we were engaged in lively conversation, Ismalia, like a real mother, was involved with several female workers, although some of them looked old enough to be her grandmother. Aniceto was teaching us important lessons, drawing upon apparently insignificant circumstances, and Alfredo was welcoming co-workers in every condition imaginable, displaying not just a spirit of solidarity, but one of great kindness. He laughed affectionately or offered opinions without the least sign of impatience or irritation. The harmonious environment did me a lot of good. Everything breathed order and understanding, goodness and harmony. I was strongly attracted to Alfredo's paternal attitude expressed in energy and friendship, organization, and understanding. I asked Aniceto's permission to listen to the instructions being given to the numerous co-workers. A friendly co-worker was speaking excitedly to Alfredo. He was an elderly man with a humble expression and was talking to Alfredo with an attitude of true respect. "Have you heard the news?" "Yes, Alonso. Our messengers have informed me in the greatest detail. Your widow is still very much grief-stricken, but your little ones are enjoying good health, although they, too, are still troubled because of your absence." The old man, who seemed to be very kind, nodded and added, "I miss them so much." His eyes displayed a resigned sadness, like someone who desires something and measures the extent of the obstacles involved. "But you mustn't agonize over it, Alonso," continued Alfredo. "I know that you're now working for your family's future. While on the earth as parents, we can make a lot of arrangements for our children. Here, however, we can more safely take certain measures on their behalf. We do not always see things clearly enough to make the right decisions while on earth, but here it is possible to determine more accurately what would be of lasting interest for those we love. The higher sentiment is always the correct path for our soul. Nevertheless, we cannot say the same with regard to the sentimentalism cultivated in the physical realm. You must be very careful not to let your mind get confused. A longing that hurts and keeps us from attending to the divine will is neither praiseworthy nor useful. It is an illness of the heart, casting us into unfathomable abysses of thought." Alonso stopped smiling, and his eyes filled with tears as he spoke in a beseeching voice. "I know how appropriate your remarks are, Alfredo, sir. Thanks to Jesus, I have been improving my mental life with the new tasks you have given me. I feel spiritually renewed, in fact. I know that your words of caution have not been without reason. Still, I would dare to ask for permission to visit my wife and kids. At night, when I'm saying my prayers, I feel their thoughts around me. They penetrate me deeply and draw all my attention to the earth. Sometimes I manage to get a little rest, but it's not easy. I know that my wife and children are calling for me in their grief. This certainty disturbs me somehow. I haven't felt the usual steadfastness in my daily work, and I would like to remedy the situation. I realize that my current obligations are elsewhere, and that I should accept that fact. Nevertheless, I must confess that my spiritual struggle has been awful. I'm certain that you forgive my weakness. What head of a family wouldn't feel tormented at hearing such anguished appeals from home and feel helpless at not having the means to assist them as the situation requires?" Displaying profound longing, he wiped his eyes and continued, "I wish I could urge them to compose themselves and have courage, explaining that my heart is still fragile and needs their support. I would be glad if I could ask them to do just that much so that I could meet my current obligations without failing. Maybe now you give me the permission? There's a group of spiritist friends close to our home. Maybe I could transmit a few words, no matter how brief, and try to comfort my wife and children." Alfredo remained unperturbed and didn't say no. He seemed to understand completely the concern of the friendly and humble worker. I noticed in his lucid gaze the sincere desire to be of help, and with extreme admiration for his generous conduct, he offered, "We just might be able to give you what you want, my dear Alonso. our emissaries could take you there as they make their regular rounds. However, believe me that, as a friend, I would be concerned about you. It might upset your peace of mind. I can't abuse my authority, and I know that each one undergoes the experience he needs, but I believe it is in your vital interest to strengthen your soul. It is essential that we conform ourselves to the designs of the Eternal. You and your wife would not have been separated if you didn't need new experiences. Because of your separation from her, you too have been suffering from the difficulties that she has been grieving over in your absence. Alonso, I believe that God leaves us alone sometimes so that we can learn all over again and make our hearts stronger. When made use of by the soul, however, loneliness precedes the sublime re-encounter. Moreover, you must not forget that your children belong to God and that they need to come to grips with their responsibilities and think about their own attainments. For now, they are tearful and downcast. Rebelliousness is visiting their unwary souls. Domestic chaos set in after you came here. But what can you do except ask for the blessings of the Eternal One for them and for us? They need to accept the way things really are at the moment. You have already given them what was reasonable, and now you too must evolve and grow on the new path to which you have been called. What would happen, my dear fellow, if you allowed a full-scale invasion of unhealthy sentimentalism into your thoughts? You are so dedicated to your family that for now I don't feel you are prepared well enough to see all that has been happening in your old home without suffering disastrously. Some time ago, I authorized the visit of 2 of our workers to the earth so that they could see their widows and embrace their little ones again. But they were so violently shaken by the situation that they couldn't return to their duties here. They stayed there, clinging to the nest they had abandoned. They didn't keep proper guard over their hearts. They listened too much to the grieving of their families, enveloping themselves in the heavy fluids of the home environment. After the week that had been granted to them was up, they couldn't bring themselves to return. They were like birds imprisoned by the enticement of temptation. Those in charge of personal news returned to the station without them, which came as a great surprise to me. And frankly, I don't know when they will be able to resume their duties. The damage to both was awful. After a short pause, Alfredo concluded, "Flying high requires strong wings." Alonso, who had been listening wide-eyed, resigned himself. "I've changed my mind. You're right." Alfredo embraced him and whispered, "May God illumine your mind." I was amazed as other co-workers approached Alfredo, begging for explanations and opinions, and I learned much from his example as he responded to all in a firm and kindly voice, in a true display of brotherly interest. So tonight we're talking about chapter 26, listening to the workers. And as you already know, and I say it all the time, we've been following the chapters of the book The Messengers. Last week we read and commented on chapter 25, her prayer's effects, talking about what the prayer that Ismalia made and how that prayer affected all the spirits who were at the aid station, in that deep sleep, having nightmares and so on. So now, and as if we remember, and if you remember what we had last time, they were already finishing that day of work, and the prayer was the end of the day, the end of the night. So they had to go back and regroup and keep going with the other activities. So now we reach a point where we're starting to get closer and closer to the moment when Andre, Vicente, and Aniceto will go back or keep going on their task to come here on Earth, to the physical realm, to help and to have the meetings and meet the people that they're going to meet, so that they can help the incarnate ones on their mission to Earth. So we still have a few chapters in the aid station here, and at this very moment, what's happening is Andre is starting to, Andre is curious. We can say this word if we remember well how curious Andre is. If we go back to Nosso Lar, and we will see more of his curiosity in play. In here, he wants to know more about the services, about how Alfredo deals with people, about what's going on around. So that's basically what's going to happen in this chapter and also in the next chapter, with a slight difference between the two spirits who Alfredo will listen to, and we're going to be able to know a little bit more about their story. So this chapter 26, we will hear, and you already heard the reading of the chapter, and as we keep saying also, hopefully you have read the chapter yourself, and you have the book with yourself, so that you can take notes and make notes on yourself, on your book. So once you have the chance, so you can go back to the book and reread it, or read a specific chapter to get a deeper sense of that passage, and take that lesson with you, as I and Francisca also does, and a lot of other people naturally do when they have certain passages of this and other books in their hearts, for the moments and for the circumstances when things similar, not the same, but similar to these happen in their lives. So here, Andre is walking around and seeing how the aid station works, and what's interesting is that he uses this word, friendliest, to describe the atmosphere and the harmony that he feels amongst the workers. And what is interesting about this word that he uses, he says it, and I'm quoting, I noticed that the work at the station was unfolding in the friendliest and most harmonious atmosphere. So it was a very harmonic feeling that he was observing. But he goes on and he uses another word, right? Hierarchy. And it's interesting that sometimes while here on Earth, once we think about a superior, a boss or a supervisor, it's rare, or I don't know, maybe it's becoming less rare these days, that unfortunately it's not the way I see or I perceive when people are talking about their bosses, is that it's very rare that we call our bosses our friends, right? And it's usually not very harmonic, right? And it's not a very harmonic atmosphere, or at least not very common. So it is interesting because we tend to believe that there cannot be friendship when you have a superior person to you in your job, or let's say in your work. I already said in your job, right? But in your work, or if you're a student, with your teacher, with your professor, because sometimes we mix things up, right? And what Andre, I think, wants us to understand here is that there can be friendship, there can be harmony once we really understand that everybody has its own place in the ladder of evolution. A person can be a superior in terms of, let's say, in a school, right? May be the principal of the school, and I may be a student in that school. And the principal is hierarchically superior to the student. However, there may be the case, and I bet we can see this very, very often, there are some other people in that same school which are hierarchically superior to the principal, but not in terms of the physicality or the materiality of the situation, right, of the society, societal situation, but in terms of spirituality. There may be a person as a counselor or even as a teacher to which the principal goes and talk to that person so that they or he or she can go and say, give me your opinion about this. Why? Because the person may be spiritually superior to the other person. And in those cases, it's a natural superiority. It's not something that it's imposed because of a position in the school, as in the example that I'm using here, or it may be in your home, right, or in our home. There may be, I'm a father and my wife is a mother, but maybe one of our children is superior to us in terms of spirituality, and who knows, right, how old we are in terms of spirituality or in terms of being more mature spiritually speaking, right? So we need to understand that we need to have the natural respects for notions of hierarchy, as he says here. However, we can have and be friends with everybody, but we need to keep in mind that if a person has a position and it's superior to mine, we have to respect that position, right? And if the person is not as high in the hierarchy as I am, I also need to respect the position that the person has, but also the person as a person or as a spirit, because it's not because I am a teacher and the other is a student that I am superior mentally or spiritually, morally than all the students in my class. So that's the comment that I want to make on this very first paragraph here, and I know it's a little bit longer than usual. It's a very small paragraph, but I think this is a very, very important thing that sometimes we lose focus on, and we tend to look at other people that are in an inferior, quote unquote, here position than we are, and because we still are so proud and we are envious and we are so selfish that we are not able to overcome the materiality of the situation and look at the other person as an equal to us, right? And sometimes even more as a superior to us, despite the physical and the position that we have at that instant in society. So, moving on, they were engaged in lively conversation, and while Andrea here will give us another example of what we just talked about, right? Ismalia was like a real mother, right? She was involved with a lot of female workers, and then he says, quote, although some of them looked old enough to be her grandmother, end quote. So it is interesting here, well, she looks like a real mother, but some of those spirits looked like they could be their grandmother. So it's exactly what we were talking about here. It's not about the appearance. It's not about how old you are and the other one how young the other one are. It's really a deeper sense of spirituality, a deeper sense of who I am, who the other person is, and morally speaking, who will be the one that will have the natural position of being the leader or of that group, societal group. And then he mentions Aniceto. who was teaching important lessons out of small things, and that's basically what we try to do here, right? We try to draw from apparently insignificant circumstances, because that's what Andre does, right? He wants us to really take a closer look at these apparently very small things, but they are very, very important for all of us. And he also mentions Alfredo, which was talking to the co-workers, and the co-workers were in all different conditions, and that's what we're going to see in this chapter 26 and in the next chapter 27. And he mentions that Alfredo was not displaying just a spirit of solidarity, but he was also being very, very kind. To which we also can take a lesson here, right? We can be friends with the other person, but we don't necessarily, because we're a friend, we are kind at all times. And Alfredo here does both, right? He is a friend to those who come to him, but he is also very kind at all times. One thing that I also like about this paragraph is how he ends it, because he says something that although I may be repeating myself here, maybe it's changing with time, and hopefully it is changing with time. When we think about a person who is in charge of something, our image, most of the times, of that person is of a person that's very serious, that never laughs, that never, jokes around. And Alfredo is not a person, or is not a spirit like that. Andre says that he laughed affectionately, or offered opinions without the least sign of impatience or irritation. So what I like about this is naturally that's what we would hope of a leader, right? Being not showing impatience and not being irritated by the questions and by everything that's happening around them. But the laughs sometimes are harder, because sometimes the person who is on top, who is a supervisor, the person doesn't want to show that affection, so that the other person who is in an inferior, quote unquote, here again, position, don't overstep the power or the position that the other one has. But once again, the position here was not acquired by means of a test, right, of doing an exam and then passing the exam. No, naturally it was chosen because of how the person behaves and what the person is able to achieve naturally in working together with the other ones. So it's not something that was imposed on the others. It's a natural position of leadership, and that's why all the others come to that person to talk and to try to solve their problems. So it is interesting that Alfredo has that capability of laughing and of still not being afraid of a person coming and taking his place, because it's not a matter of being afraid. It's a matter of doing the job. If you can do the job, and if you're doing the job well, then that's what needs to be done. And Andre, paying attention to all this, right, was really impressed by how Alfredo behaved, and by all the other order, by all the understanding, the goodness, and the harmony. So he wanted to know a little bit more on how Alfredo would deal with those spirits who were in need of help. And Andre goes to Aniceto, which is his superior in this specific task, and asks him if he could, be together or be close to Alfredo to hear what he is telling and how he is speaking to those spirits who are coming to him. To which Aniceto allowed him. And here I'd like to make a brief comment on the translation of this part, this specific paragraph, which starts by saying, I asked Aniceto's permission to listen to the instruction. So it's a small paragraph, but I think it's worth mentioning. I went back to the Portuguese version, the original version, and although in this paragraph there's 3 mentions of Aniceto, when I was looking at the Brazilian version, there are no names in this paragraph, and maybe that's why the confusion was made, because it's apparent here when we are reading that it's Aniceto who is talking to this elderly man. However, it is not Aniceto, and we will understand it why later on. So that's why if you go back to the reading in the beginning of this program, you'll see that we read Alfredo and Alfredo. So we mentioned Alfredo in this paragraph. So you may have noticed if you were following our reading with the book by your side. And why? It's because Alfredo is the one who is responsible for the work, right? So if Andre comes and asks Aniceto's permission to listen, he asks his superior to go to Alfredo and listen to what the coworker is talking to Alfredo, because Alfredo is the responsible for that for the program that they are running at that specific time. So that old man or that elderly man goes and asks something to Alfredo, and Alfredo will keep talking to him, explaining to him how Alfredo thinks about this man's situation. And the man comes to Alfredo and says, "Have you heard the news?" And Alfredo says, being on top of the situation, says, "Yes, Alonso, our messengers have informed me in the greatest detail." He talks about his widow and about his little ones. So Alfredo knows the situation, right? Alfredo knows what's going on, what happened. So it's natural that he wants to know everything that needs to be known about all his workers so that he can help them at all times whenever needed. So the old man comes and says, "Oh, I miss them so much." And Alfredo will start talking to him. "But you mustn't agonize over it, Alonso. And as we've been doing, I would just like to say that, Alonso, once we find these names, right? We try to get the meaning of the name of the person to see if it has anything to do with the person and how the person behaves, or even to inform us a little bit more about what that person is and who that person really is, so that we can have that feeling of why the person is asking what she's asking or what he is asking, on how the person takes what was said to him or to her. And it is very interesting here also, and again in this case, because the name Alonso can mean and is related to nobility. So it can be said that Alonso means noble and ready, or it can also mean ready to become a noble. So it is interesting to notice, and we will go back a little bit, maybe if I don't forget, to why it is interesting that his name is Alonso, that the name can mean in some way nobility, or the path to become a noble person. And hopefully we will be able to talk a little about this if we have time. So he misses his family, right? And Alfredo says, "Well, but just don't agonize over it. You're working for your family's future. When we are on earth, we can make a lot of stuff for our family. However, once we die, there's certain things that we cannot take care of anymore, and it's not under our responsibility anymore. We did what we could have done, right? And sometimes, even under the best interest, which is, I love my family, I love my children, sometimes we cannot see things clearly, and we choose stuff that we shouldn't have chosen. So we don't make the right decisions while on earth. that's what Alfredo is telling Alonso. The question to us here is how are we doing, right, at this very moment in our family, right? Are we taking the right decisions? Are we really doing the best that we can? And it's not for us to become anxious about it, but it is for us to really keep thinking about how we are doing so that we can try to improve at all times, to do it better next time. If I realize that I made a mistake, I'm sorry, let's try it again. Let's do it better next time. Let's put a small blinking LED in our conscience so that when that situation happens again, that LED starts blinking, and then I say, hey, something is telling me that I should act differently right now. And I'm learning with my own mistakes and becoming more attuned to what the good spirits are trying to make me see so that I can't and I don't do and I don't commit the same mistakes that I committed before. So, but once we die, and he keeps going, right? Once we die, and here, right, Alfredo is telling Alonso, it is possible to determine more accurately what would be of lasting interest for those we love. So once we are here, once we discarnated and we don't have only that small fraction of the reality, and we can only see a very, very brief moment of the entire life, right? We're not seeing once we are incarnated, we're not seeing the big picture. We're only seeing a very small fragment of what that big picture is. So once we die, we can see it clearer and we can make different choices. And that's the reason why Alfredo is going to say what he says next. And I'm going to quote because this is a very, very important sentence for the understanding of the whole chapter. He says it, and I quote, "The higher sentiment is always the correct path for our soul. Nevertheless, we cannot say the same with regard to the sentimentalism cultivated in a physical realm." Unquote. So he is comparing the higher sentiment to a sentimentalism, which can be equaled to a certain type of negative affection or negative attachment to those people. But and this attachment is very, very related to a selfishness. Those are my children, right? Those are my spirits, or this is my family, right? So it is different than a higher sentiment, right? Which is the love that God is asking of us, that Jesus came to earth to teach us, because it's not love, it's not a feeling or a sentiment of attachment, but on the contrary is a sentiment of letting go, of setting everybody free so that they can do what they want the same way I want to do what I want, right? Naturally, this cannot be detached from goodness, from justice, from equality, from society. So everything needs to be together. But to be attached or to have that sentimentalism, which is cultivated most of the times once we are incarnated, we are only attaching ourselves to those people instead of learning how to love those people. And that's when, and then Alfredo says that we must be very careful to not let our mind get confused, mixing these two things. A longing, and he goes on, a longing that hurts and keeps us from attending to the divine will is neither praiseworthy nor useful. So we cannot have that craving. We cannot have that burning desire of being together with the other person if I can't, if my situation at that moment doesn't allow me to. I may miss that person, which is fine, right? Which has no problem in it. But the burning inside is something that we need to work. And as he finalizes, he says, it is, and I'm quoting here, an illness of the heart, casting us into unfathomable abysses of thought. So once we start entering that situation of craving, of that longing that hurts, and keep us away from what God wants us to do, this is not healthy and will keep us going down and down in our thoughts, in the dark abysses of darkness, right? And it's going to be harder and harder for us to get out of it. So we have to be very aware of this. We have to be wary of what's going on in our minds in terms of why am I feeling those desires, those wishes to be present and to be there with the person. Is it due to a higher sentiment, or is it due to a sentimentalism? Meaning, is it really love, or is it selfishness? That's the question, and that's very important for us to make the difference here between one and another. And after Alfredo finalizes this first part, Alonso, who was apparently smiling or had a small smile in his face, he stops smiling, tears up, and speaks, almost as if he's soliciting something or wishing that Alfredo recognizes what he's about to ask and allows him what he's about to ask, allows him to do what he's about to ask. He starts by recognizing how appropriate the remarks that Alfredo had just given are, and he thanks Jesus for the improvements that he has been able to achieve so far, that he's praying at all times, that he is spiritually renewed, he's better. However, he still feels that their relatives, right, his wife and his little ones, are still calling for him at all times, and sometimes he can rest, but sometimes it's not easy. So I stop here and I think, how many times haven't we felt the same way? Right? Even here on earth, I'm not even talking about a person that died and I call for that person, but I mean sometimes even with our own difficulties here on earth, right? How many times haven't we felt so lost, or I don't know what to do, or I want to do something but I can't because of my duties, because of how I am right now, because of my current obligations. And that's exactly how Alonso is feeling at that specific moment. And he says, I must confess that my spiritual struggle has been awful. Aren't we all? Wouldn't we all need to confess, if not for others, but to ourselves, that our spiritual struggles are tough? So this is a very important step of recognizing that we are still human, that we are still on earth, that we are still improving. And it's a very important step that we recognize that. And this is what I find very, very interesting in this piece by Alonso here, because he says, okay, I know and understand what you're saying, but what head of a family, and that's how he ends his this first part of his solicitation, we could call it, right? What head of a family wouldn't feel tormented at hearing such anguished appeals from home and feel helpless at not having the means to assist them as the situation requires? So haven't we all at some points felt the same thing? I want to help, but I don't have the means to help. What can I do, right? And this is still not what he's asking, but naturally we can feel what he's about to ask. He wants to go and visit them. He wants to go and visit his family. Right? He wipes his eyes, and then he continues by asking, I wish I could go and talk to them. ask them to have courage, explaining that his heart, that Alonso's heart, is still suffering. So if they could help him on how and what he's feeling at that moment, I would be glad, he goes on, and ask them to do that much so that I could, from here, keep doing what I need to do. Maybe now you give me permission to do that. Can you give me a permission to do that, Alfredo? There's a group of spiritist friends close to our home. I could go there and transmit a few words, no matter how brief, and try to comfort my wife and children. So he didn't only thought of helping their children, helping his children, helping his family and his wife also, or his widow also, but he also knows how to do it, or through a spiritist center, right? To give a message, and the message would be, given to his family so that they could go on. And he already knows how to do it. So he has a plan in his mind, and he is following a path. Is it the best path? What is his true feeling inside? That's the question that remains, right? And Alfredo doesn't say no. He doesn't say no, and that's what Andre tells us right here. Alfredo remained unperturbed and didn't say no. He seemed to understand completely the concern of the friendly and humble worker. And Andre goes and says that he noticed that Alfredo had the sincere desire to be of help, and he will offer his help. He will give a message, and here naturally we know that the message is for Alonso, because that's how the conversation goes. But this message is for all of us, naturally, right? As we've been doing in every episode, we really understand that all these messages, although they were written for one specific spirit, or were used in a very specific situation in No Solar, or around No Solar in the spiritual realm, it is for all of us, right? It is for us to really understand how things work, and how these messages can be of use for us, right? And talking about messages, before going to what Alfredo is going to tell us, I would just like to remind everyone that if you want to send us a message, right, if you want to give us a shout out, right, you can go to the website of Kardec Radio, right, KardecRadio.com, and there you will find ways to enter in contact with us. There's a contact form there. You can go to KardecRadio.com and find the page Contact Us, and there you can send us an email and enter in contact, send a message, send a brief note to us, saying what you're thinking. Maybe you have something to add, maybe you have something to ask, maybe you have something to correct us. It's always very important to have a feedback so that we know how we are doing and what we can improve and so on. But you can also go to our Facebook page, or you can find us on Twitter. So in both these platforms, you can just type Kardec Radio, and then you will find us, twitter.com/Kardec Radio, or, if you know how to use Twitter, at Kardec Radio. And on Facebook, it's facebook.com/Kardec Radio. And there you will find, links to our previous shows, of the whole Kardec Radio lineup. And leave us a message, you can give us a link, you can give us, just a hello. Send us your message. It is very, very important for all of us to keep in touch with you who are listening to Kardec Radio. And remember, there's not only this program at Kardec Radio, right? We have programs on Mondays, we have programs on Wednesdays, which is this one, we have programs on Thursdays, on Saturdays, and on Sundays, and hopefully more shows will keep popping up at Kardec Radio. So stay tuned, KardecRadio.com. So going back to Alfredo and Alonso, Alfredo says that, as Andre mentioned, he didn't say no, right? And he doesn't say yes either, which is also very, very interesting. And he starts by saying, we just might be able to give you what you want, my dear Alonso. You know, but we have friends here, we have emissaries here that could take you there and help you there. However, and this is very important, believe me, as a friend, I would be concerned about you. Remember, Andre just said that Alfredo seemed to understand completely the concern of the friendly and humble worker. He wanted to help him. So, when Andre says that he understood completely, he can see things in Alonso that maybe Andre wasn't able to see, that maybe we wouldn't be able to see. And why is that? Naturally, it's because if you are in a spiritually or morally more elevated position than the other spirit, you'll be able to feel what those words and what those thoughts are. Most similarly to when a child, my daughter, your son, comes to you and asks something. Once you look at that small little creature, that we call son or a daughter, right? It's almost visible that we can see what that small being wants. The person that the child may be speaking something, and you see the intention behind, right? What she or he wants us to do. And here is almost the same way, or I would say not almost. Here is deeper than this, because it's a spiritual connection. It's a spiritual sight that you look at the other person and you see the intention, you feel the intention. So Alfredo doesn't say no, but once he looks at it and he knows the situation, maybe he's feeling that it's still not the right time. But he doesn't want to say no, and he doesn't want to say yes. Why? Because it's not his decision to make. He will offer an advice, and that's what he's doing here. He's offering an advice. But Alfredo allows Alonso to choose by himself. But he will give him the tools to choose. And we already know what Alonso chooses, but let's hear the tools, the information that Alfredo has for Alonso and also naturally for ourselves. Alfredo says that he would be concerned about you because it might upset your peace of mind. I think that you still need to strengthen your soul for the things that you're about to see if you go there. It is essential that we understand what God wants for us and why it happened the way it happened. Not recognizing that it had a need to happen that way is going against God's will. We can choose going. There's nobody saying no, but it needs to be our choice. And let's just think a little bit. You and your wife would not have been separated if you both didn't need new experiences. So you died, she didn't die. Your children are there, you are here. You both needed these experiences. Why? That's not the way to discuss this, right? You have been grieving, and she has been grieving. Both of you are going through this situation. We don't know why, but this is how it works on the level that we are right now. And Alfredo offers him an explanation. Alonso, I'm quoting, I believe that God leaves us alone sometimes so that we can learn all over again and make our hearts stronger. When made use of by the soul, however, loneliness precedes the sublime re-encounter. This is Alfredo providing Alonso and ourselves the explanation of why sometimes these separations occur when they do occur. Do I want to take this as an explanation? Do I accept this as an explanation? It's our choice. It's my feeling that will allow me to know if I want this explanation or not, if I'm going to still be fighting against this, if I'm going to still be questioning why God separated me from my wife, in this case, right? Alonso from his wife, or from a father that just died, or from a mother, or from a child that had just died, right? We're not disregarding the situation in itself, the hurt feelings, right? The power of that separation, or the hurt that comes from that separation. No, we need to be there for those people who are hurting. We need to be together. We need to really put some comfort in their minds, sometimes to listen, sometimes not to say anything, right? Not to try to comfort with words that maybe are more insensitive than just, stay shut and open the ears to listen to their cries, to listen to what they have to say or they need to say to put out of their hearts at that specific moment. But when it's time and when we are ready, we need to understand that the solace will come from the idea that God is in control, that God knows what needs to happen because of our choices in the past, and that sometimes we need to go through the whole process of education again, because it is hard for us to learn when we try it only once, right? Nobody ever learned how to write once the teacher taught us one day in school. No, we need to go back the other day and do it again. Go back the other day and do it again, and again, and again. How many times, right? So that's basically what Alfredo is telling us here. Hey, if you're going through this, I know that it's hard, and maybe that's what we need to learn from the situation, knowing that it's hard, living through that, and say, tomorrow there's a new day. Tomorrow the sun will be bright again. The universe will be there. I'm going to be there. My father, my mother, my relative, my friend will be there in another form, but it will be there, or they will be there, yeah. And the children, in Alonso's case here, they need to also know what they're going to be able to achieve, and they're going through their own needs, right? They're children. They will grow up. They will become adolescents, right? They will have their phase of rebelliousness. The problems at home will appear, but that's how it is. That's how it's supposed to be. It happens to everybody. We need to understand this, that it's part of life. And what can we take from that? Right? We have to understand that it has a purpose. We need to accept, and Alfredo is telling this to Alonso, they need to accept the way things really are at the moment. And when Alfredo is saying they, he's talking to us. We need to accept, right? And if we really gave our family, if we are really giving our family the best, what is reasonable, we did what we were supposed to do at that moment. From then on, what they need to have will probably not come from me anymore, will come from life, will come from different people that they will meet in their lives. So, and then I'm going to go back to that first speech, or that first talk by Alfredo, when he talks about the higher sentiments or the sentimentality. And here is where Alfredo will make us see that maybe that's what he is seeing in Alonso. And he asks, right, what would happen, my dear fellow, if you allowed a full-scale invasion of unhealthy sentimentalism into your thoughts? So he is calling Alonso and asking him, so what have you inside of yourself? Is it higher sentiment, or is it sentimentalism for your family? You are, and I'm going to read it here, you are so dedicated to your family that for now I don't feel you are prepared well enough to see all that has been happening in your old home without suffering disastrously. Unquote. So what Alfredo is seeing here is that all those wishes of seeing, of going back to his family, are not yet coming from a higher sentiment within himself, but more from a sentimentalist, unhealthy sentimentalism coming from within Alonso. And this is a question for ourselves, as I said in the beginning. Once we think of our family, when we think of our father, our mother, our daughters and brothers, our sons, our sisters, is it out of sentimentality, unhealthy sentimentality, unhealthy sentimentalism, or is it out of a greater and higher sentiment? Are we really striving to love them, or is it just more out of a possession point of view, or a possessive point of view, or a selfish point of view? That's basically what Alfredo is asking Alonso here. When he looks at Alonso, he sees it, that what he's doing is he's clinging, and he uses this word later on, right? But not referring to Alonso. He refers to these two spirits who he gives us an example, right? Once he allowed two spirits to go and visit their families, and those spirits were not able to return to their work in the colony, in the aid station, because they were so distraught by what they saw that they clinged to the nest. So once Alfredo is looking at Alonso at this moment, that's what he is seeing. He is seeing that he is still not ready to do what he's asking to do. He is not ready. If he goes there, he will be lost the same way those spirits got lost, attached and clinging to their old nest. They couldn't bring themselves to return. And he goes on. They were like birds imprisoned by the enticement of temptation. The damage to both was awful. And I bet that Alfredo is very regretful of having allowed that to be done. But he doesn't want to say no. And he doesn't say no, but he also doesn't say yes. He just provided us explanation. He provided us tools to think about, okay, if you want to go and do this, are you ready to do this? Are you really ready? Do you really have the commitment within yourself to do this? Right? So don't start something that you don't think that you're really prepared to go along with it. We're not saying that we should only go and do something if we are 100% knowledgeable of what that is. No, because we are going to learn a lot, right? If we prepare ourselves theoretically to do something, naturally we will learn a lot when we go and do it practically. However, we we cannot or we should not go and do something without knowing at least the basics of the theory. If we don't have any certainty at all that I'm going to be able to at least have the basic knowledge to deal with the situation that I'm about to deal. And that's what Alfredo is telling Alonso here in a different way, but that's what he is saying. Hey, I don't feel that you have the basics. And here, this chapter is basically recounting the story of what Andre went through in the book No Solar, right? He wanted to see his family. He wanted to see his widow, but he was not ready to go. After a year of work, he was able to go. Maybe some people could go faster than what he did. Maybe some people may take longer to visit their families after they died. Why? Because it's up to each individuality. It's up to us as individuals, as spirits, not as a rule for everybody. Oh no, after a year you'll be able to go. No, it depends on how I do it. It depends on my effort, on really how much I improve over time doing this. And Alfredo finalizes, concludes after a short pause by saying, flying high requires strong wings. If we want to go there, if we want to fly high, if we really want to help, we really need to be prepared to endure the whole situation. We really need to, if we want to run a marathon, we will not run a marathon on the first day. We will not run the full 26.1 miles or 42 kilometers on the very first day. If we do it, it will take all of our strength and we will not be able to do it. However, if I'm really putting my mind to do it, I will do it one day. But first, I will have to run 100 meters, a kilometer, eat right, drink lots of water, and prepare to one day be able to run a marathon. That I will be able to do it, but it will be one day. It will not be on the first day. What Alonso is asking is more or less to run a marathon. And he probably is able to run 10 kilometers, as what Alfredo is saying, or 20 kilometers, 10 miles. But he is not ready yet to run the full 26.1 miles. Maybe half a marathon, not a full marathon. Are we ready to run the marathon? If we are not, the question is then, are we preparing to run it? Hopefully we are, because that's what we will need to do it one day. And as we mentioned before, Alonso's name, right, is ready to become noble. Is he ready to become noble? I would say so, because by what he answers, he really understood what Alfredo was telling him. And he says, resigned. I've changed my mind. You are right. It's not to say that we need to agree with everything that a person or a spirit that's superior to me is saying. No, I can choose. And that's what Alfredo is telling us here. Okay, I'm giving you the reasons, but if God gives me a choice, God also gives you the choice. You are the one who can choose what you want to do, what you end up doing. So it's up to you. But Alonso, by understanding the will of God, and that the will of God in this case came to him through Alfredo, understands that he still needs to prepare more for the marathon, to fly high, to strengthen his wings, to fly really high, to get rid of the sentimentality, of the cheap sentimentality, and to acquire more of the high sentiment of love. And he says again that he changed his mind and that Alfredo was right. Alfredo then embraces him and whispers, "May God illumine your mind. May you be able to really understand what God wants for you, and that what God has for you is always the best." Andre is amazed by how Alfredo approaches his co-workers that come to him begging for explanations and opinions, and he learned a lot from his example as he responded to all of them in a firm and kind voice, in a true display of brotherly interest. As I said before, as I said in the middle of this program, we are very, very interested in hearing from you, giving us advices, showing us your affection, telling us what you like, how you would prefer the program to go, if you have something to correct us, if you have words of encouragement. We are here to listen as much as we are here to talk. So please, let us listen to what you have to say to us. We will be very happy to hear from you, me, Francisca, and all the other workers at Kardec Radio. And I wish you a very good week, hoping that you will be together with us next week at the same time on Kardec Radio. Have a great week, everyone.
Thank you for listening to Kardec Radio, broadcasting live every Saturday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Email us and share your comments at www.kardecradio.com. Until next time, we wish you many blessings.